The rain didn't just fall on Manhattan, it carved through me like a blade. You became ugly after 2 kids. Julian's words were still ringing in my ears as I stood on the wet pavement of Central Park South, my hands locked around a double stroller that held everything I had left in this world. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse I'd called home for 6 years, I could see him. My husband. His hands tangled in blonde hair that wasn't mine. His mouth pressed against a woman whose body hadn't carried his children. The younger woman, his new CFO, he'd called her during the restraining order hearing I didn't even know was happening, leaned into him like she belonged there. My twin daughters slept in the stroller, 6 months old, and completely unaware that their father had just erased us from his perfect life. The intercom crackled, Julian's voice, cold and surgical. "Look at yourself, Rhonda. Soft, tired, ugly. I have a reputation to maintain. She doesn't have stretch marks." A black Maybach cut through the rain like a shark through water. The door opened, and I saw him. Korean, sharp-featured, with eyes that held something between concern and calculation. Min. I knew his name from the business news. Julian's most dangerous rival, the CEO who'd been systematically dismantling my husband's empire for the last 2 years. "Get in, Rhonda," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Before Julian erases even the memory of you." I should have asked why a billionaire was parked outside my building at 2 a.m. Should have wondered how he knew my name, knew what was happening behind those gold leaf doors. But when you're drowning in a thunderstorm with 2 infants who need you to survive, you don't question the hand that reaches down. You grab it, and you pray you can afford whatever it costs. The rain was cold, but my skin had gone numb. I stood on Central Park South in a red dress I'd been forcing myself into for weeks, the fabric clinging to my postpartum body like evidence of failure. My natural curls, the ones I'd finally stopped straightening 4 months ago when Julian said it didn't matter what I looked like anymore, were plastered against my skull. Inside the penthouse, the one Architectural Digest had photographed when Julian made Forbes' 30 under 30 list, my husband was kissing another woman on the couch where I'd nursed our daughters, under the abstract painting we'd chosen together in Soho. He wasn't even trying to hide it. "Ma'am." A security guard I'd never seen before approached, his umbrella casting a shadow over the stroller. "Mr. Castellano instructed me to ensure you vacate the premises. I can give you 5 minutes, but then I'll need to escort you off the property." I stared at him, rain mixing with something hotter on my cheeks. "I live here." "Not anymore, ma'am. Mr. Castellano was very clear." The Maybach's window lowered, and Min leaned across the passenger seat. His suit was the kind of expensive that whispered instead of screamed. Charcoal wool, perfectly tailored, water beating off it like it had been engineered to repel the world. "Rhonda Castellano," he said, and his accent was nothing like Julian's. Julian had spent his entire adult life sanding down anything that made him seem foreign, ethnic, different. This man's voice carried soul in it, unapologetically. "We met once, 3 years ago at the Aegis Global Gala. You were wearing green. You told me you thought corporate architecture had lost its soul." The memory surfaced slowly, blurred by shock and rain. A fundraiser at the plaza. A Korean man who'd asked about my design work, who'd listened when I talked about negative space as an emotional language. Julian had appeared mid-conversation, his hand tight on my elbow steering me away. Later that night, he'd accused me of flirting. I'd been so confused. We were just talking about buildings. "That was you," I whispered. Min's eyes held mine. "Get in, please. That guard is going to force you off this property in exactly 4 minutes, and your daughters are going to wake up cold." I should have called a cab. Should have found a hotel, a shelter, a friend with a couch. Should have functioned like an adult who hadn't just been discarded like furniture that didn't match the new decor. But Min already had the door open, and behind me, through the window, Julian was laughing at something the blonde woman whispered in his ear. So I got in, And I discovered that when a man like Min offers salvation, the price is already being calculated before you even know you're paying. The Maybach's interior smelled like leather and something darker. Cedar, maybe, or sandalwood mixed with the kind of cologne that didn't come in department store bottles. Min didn't speak as the driver pulled away from the curb, and I couldn't stop shaking. Not from cold. From the sudden, dizzying realization that I had no idea where we were going or why this man had been waiting for me. My daughters stirred in the stroller I'd collapsed beside me. Min's eyes flicked to them, then back to my face. There was something in his expression I couldn't read. Calculation wrapped in what almost looked like concern. "Your building has cameras," he said finally, his voice low and measured. "Julian's lawyers will use tonight's footage to paint you as unstable, a woman who abandoned her home in a storm with 2 infants. They'll argue you're unfit." I stared at him. "How do you—" "I know because I would do the same thing." He leaned forward slightly, and I caught the scent of rain still clinging to his suit jacket. "Julian plays chess with people's lives, Rhonda. But he's still thinking 3 moves ahead. I'm thinking 30. The Maybach glided through Manhattan like a shadow, the city lights smearing against rain-slicked windows. I should have been afraid. Should have demanded he take me to a police station, a hospital, anywhere public. Instead, I sat frozen, watching this stranger who spoke about my husband like he'd been studying him for years. "Where are we going?" I finally managed. "Somewhere Julian can't touch you." Min's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The Aim in New York. I have a suite there, it's secure." "You just happen to have a suite available at 2 a.m.? His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I don't believe in coincidences, Rhonda. I believe in preparation." The car stopped outside the hotel's discreet entrance. A valet appeared with an umbrella before I could even process that we'd arrived. Min stepped out first, then turned back, extending his hand. I looked at his palm, broad, steady, completely dry despite the rain, and felt something twist in my chest. When you've been told you're ugly for months, when you've been made to feel invisible in your own home, a hand extended without hesitation feels like violence and mercy at the same time. I took it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and certain, and he pulled me out into the rain like I weighed nothing at all. The suite wasn't a room. It was a statement. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, and in the corner, my breath caught, a fully stocked nursery, white crib, changing table, bottles lined up with military precision. "What is this?" I whispered, still holding one of my sleeping daughters against my chest. Min moved past me, shrugging off his wet jacket. Beneath it, his shirt clung to his shoulders, the fabric dark with rain. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the nursery and pulled out a container of formula, the exact brand I used, the organic one that cost $40 a canister. "I had it prepared," he said simply, measuring formula into a bottle with the kind of efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. "In case you needed it." Ice slid down my spine. "How did you know what formula my daughters use?" He turned, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, but acknowledgement. "Because I've been paying attention, Rhonda, for longer than you realize." My hands tightened around my daughter's warm body. "That's not an answer. That's a threat." "It's a fact." He set the bottle down and took a step toward me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could see the perfect structure of his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell just slightly over his forehead. "Julian has been systematically destroying you for 18 months, isolating you, drugging your evening tea to make you seem erratic in front of the household staff, building a legal case to take your children and leave you with nothing." The room tilted. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your husband is a monster, and I've been documenting every second of it." Min pulled a tablet from the desk drawer and handed it to me. "Watch." My fingers shook as I pressed play. The video showed our kitchen, my kitchen, 6 months ago. Julian, slipping something into my tea while I was turned away, chopping vegetables. The angle was perfect. Damning. "Where did you get this?" I breathed. "I own the security company Julian hired to install cameras in your penthouse." Min's voice was steady, almost gentle. "He thought he was protecting himself from you. He was actually giving me everything I needed." I looked up at him. This man who'd appeared out of nowhere, who knew my formula brand and my husband's crimes, and exactly where to find me when my world collapsed. Why? Because Julian took something from me once, and I've been waiting for the perfect moment to take everything from him. He crouched down so we were eye level, and the movement was so fluid, so controlled, it felt choreographed. "You were always going to be the way I destroyed him, Rhonda. I just didn't expect you to be this perfect when the moment finally came. I should have run. Should have grabbed my daughters and called the police, a cab, anyone." But Min was already moving, taking my sleeping baby from my arms with a gentleness that made my throat tighten. He laid her in the crib like he'd done it 1,000 times, his large hands impossibly careful against her tiny body. "You've been watching me," I said, and my voice sounded hollow. "For how long?" 3 years. He didn't even have the decency to lie. "Since the first time Julian mentioned you in a business meeting. He was complaining about your design work, how you kept suggesting changes to his developments that would cost him money. I looked you up, saw your portfolio, realized you were the only person in his life who actually had vision." He turned back to me, and the low light from the nursery lamp cast shadows across his face that made him look like something carved from stone. "Then I saw how he treated you at that gala, the way he pulled you away from our conversation like you were a child who'd wandered off, the way he made you apologize for talking about architecture with someone who actually understood it." Min's jaw clenched. "I started paying more attention after that. And the more I watched, the more I realized Julian was doing to you exactly what he does to every business he acquires, stripping away everything valuable until there's nothing left but the shell he can control." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that Julian had loved me once, that this was all some terrible mistake. But the words died in my throat, because standing in this stranger's hotel suite, holding the evidence of my husband's betrayal on a tablet, I couldn't remember the last time Julian had looked at me like I was anything other than an obstacle. "So what?" I finally managed. "You're my savior now? You're going to rescue me from the big bad husband and I'm supposed to be grateful?" "No." Min stepped closer, and this time there was nowhere to retreat. My back hit the wall near the nursery door, and he braced one hand against it, his body angled toward mine but not touching. "I'm going to give you the tools to destroy him yourself, and in exchange, you're going to help me finish what he started when he stole my first company 10 years ago." His breath was warm against my temple. I could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell the rain and cedar and something underneath that was just him. "What if I refuse?" The question came out barely above a whisper. Min's free hand came up slowly, telegraphing the movement like he was gentling a spooked animal. His fingers brushed a wet curl away from my cheek, and the touch was so light, so devastatingly careful, that I felt it everywhere. "Then you walk out that door," he said quietly, "and Julian wins. He gets the penthouse, the children, the narrative. You get to be the unstable black woman who couldn't handle motherhood, the one who abandoned her babies in a thunderstorm." I closed my eyes, hating him, hating Julian, hating myself for being here, for needing this, for feeling my body respond to the proximity of a man who just admitted to stalking me for 3 years. "What do you want from me?" I asked, and I hated how broken I sounded. "I want you to be exactly who you are." Min's thumb traced along my jawline, and I felt the shiver run through me like electricity. "Smart, ruthless, done with being small for a man who never deserved you in the first place." I opened my eyes and found him watching me with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in years. Not judged, not measured against some impossible standard, just seen. Julian kept files, Min continued, his voice dropping lower. Offshore accounts, bribes, every illegal deal he's made in the last decade. I know where they are because I helped him hide some of them before he betrayed me. But I can't access them. He changed all the passwords after he forced me out of our partnership. And you think I can? I think you're the only person who's been inside his head long enough to know how he thinks. Min's hand slid down to my shoulder, his touch firm but not restraining. I think you've spent 6 years being told you're not smart enough, not important enough, while memorizing every detail of his life just to survive. I think you know exactly what his passwords are, what his patterns are, what his weaknesses are. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could feel it. You want me to help you commit corporate espionage. I want you to take back what's yours. His eyes held mine, dark and unflinching. Every dollar he made while you raised his children. Every contact you introduced him to. Every design idea you gave him that he claimed as his own. Every piece of yourself you handed over because you thought that's what love looked like. My daughter made a small sound from the crib. Min's attention shifted immediately, his hand dropping from my shoulder as he moved to check on her. The loss of his touch felt like cold water, and I hated myself for noticing. Here's what I'm offering, he said, adjusting the blanket around my baby with impossible gentleness. I fund your legal battle. I provide evidence of Julian's abuse that no judge can ignore. I make sure you never have to see the inside of a shelter or beg for help from family who stopped calling years ago. He straightened and turned back to me. All business now, the moment of intimacy gone like it had never existed. In exchange, you help me access Julian's files. You become the face of Aegis Global's new initiative, a foundation for women escaping financial abuse, your image, your story, your voice, for 10 years. 10 years, I repeated numbly. Long enough to ensure Julian never recovers. Long enough to build something that actually matters. Min pulled a contract from the desk drawer, of course he had it ready, and set it on the table between us. Read it. Take your time. But Rhonda? He looked at me, and something in his expression shifted, softened, became almost human. Your daughters are going to wake up in 3 hours, and when they do, I need to know if you're the woman who's going to fight for them, or the one who's going to let Julian's lawyers convince a judge that you were always too broken to deserve them. The contract sat there like a loaded gun. And I realized that Min had been right about one thing. When you're drowning, you don't ask if the person saving you knows how to swim. You just pray you can survive whatever they want in return. I didn't sleep. How could I? The contract sat on the bedside table like a living thing, its terms running through my mind on an endless loop. 10 years, my image, my story, my compliance. But when dawn broke over Central Park and my daughters woke up crying, it was Min who appeared in the doorway with warmed bottles, and a calm I didn't know existed in men anymore. He didn't ask permission. He just lifted my daughter, the one with the wheeze who'd kept me up for weeks, and held her against his shoulder like she'd always belonged there. You didn't sign, he observed, testing the formula temperature against his wrist. I'm not stupid. I took my other daughter from her crib, her small body warm and solid against my chest. You don't spend 3 years watching someone without wanting something more than business revenge. Min's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. More like acknowledgement of a move well played. You're right, I don't. He sat in the chair near the window, sunlight cutting across his profile as he fed my daughter. The intimacy of it. This stranger holding my child, knowing exactly how to tilt the bottle, how to support her head, made something in my chest crack open. Julian had the fertility clinic visits recorded, Min said quietly, his eyes on my baby's face. Every appointment, every ultrasound, every time you went alone because he was too busy to watch you create his children. My hands stilled on the bottle I was holding. Why would he do that? Insurance. He was building a case against you from the moment you got pregnant, documenting every instance of erratic behavior, which was really just you being exhausted, isolated, and slowly poisoned. Min looked up at me then, and there was something in his dark eyes that looked almost like fury. He knew exactly what he was doing, and I know because I have copies of everything he recorded. How? I told you. I own the security company. He shifted my daughter in his arms, wiping a drop of milk from her chin with a gentleness that made my throat tight. But here's what Julian doesn't know. 6 years ago, when you went to that fertility clinic for the IVF procedure, there was a complication. The room felt suddenly airless. What kind of complication? Min stood slowly, still cradling my daughter, and walked to the window. Manhattan stretched out below us, glittering and indifferent. When he spoke again, his voice was so low I almost didn't hear it. Julian's sample was compromised. Unusable. The clinic called him, but he was in Tokyo closing a deal. He told them to use a donor match and never tell you. Min turned back to me, and his expression was unreadable. I made sure they used mine. The world stopped. What? The word came out strangled, airless. Your daughters aren't Julian's, Rhonda. Min's eyes held mine, steady and unflinching. They're mine. They've always been mine. And I've been waiting 6 years for the exact moment when Julian would throw you away so I could finally claim what belongs to me. The bottle slipped from my hands. Formula splashed across the pristine carpet, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he'd just said. You're lying. But even as I said it, I was looking at my daughter in his arms, at her almond-shaped eyes, the sharp elegance of her features that had never quite matched Julian's softer jawline. The way Min held her like he'd been doing it her entire life. I have the clinic records, Min said calmly, like he hadn't just detonated my entire existence. I have the consent forms Julian signed authorizing the donor match. I have DNA tests I ran 3 months ago when you took the girls to Central Park and left them with the nanny for 15 minutes. He paused. I also have video of me collecting the samples from your daughter's juice cups. Horror crashed over me in waves. You've been stalking my children. I've been monitoring my children. He said it so matter-of-factly, so completely without shame that I wanted to scream. Julian was drugging you, isolating you, building a legal case to take them away from the only parent who actually loves them. I was protecting my investment. They're not an investment. My voice cracked, and my daughter startled in my arms. I forced myself to lower my volume, but fury was burning through my veins like acid. They're human beings, my babies. Our babies. Min set my daughter gently in her crib, then turned to face me fully. And Julian was going to take them from you. He was going to win custody, ship you off to a psychiatric facility based on fabricated evidence, and raise my children with that blonde CFO who's actually an Aegis plant I've had embedded in his company for 2 years. I stared at him. What? Veronica isn't his mistress. She's my employee. Min's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. I needed Julian to fall in love with someone new so he'd discard you in exactly the public, humiliating way that would make him vulnerable to a custody challenge. I needed him to be cruel enough that even his own lawyers would struggle to defend him. My legs gave out. I sank onto the bed, still holding my daughter, my mind trying to piece together the scope of what he was describing. You orchestrated everything, the affair, the fight tonight, all of it. I orchestrated Julian's self-destruction, Min corrected. He made every choice himself. I just provided opportunities. He crossed the room and crouched in front of me, his hands resting on my knees. But you, Rhonda, you were never part of the game. You were always the prize. His touch burned through the thin fabric of my dress. I should have pushed him away, should have run, Should have called the police on this man who'd manipulated my entire life like a puppet master. Instead, I heard myself ask, why? Because 10 years ago, Julian and I were partners. We built a tech startup together in Seoul. I had the vision, he had the American contacts. We were worth $40 million when he locked me out of my own company, forged my signature on sale documents, and disappeared to New York with everything we'd built. Min's jaw tightened. He took my future, so I decided to take his. But you... I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the magnitude of what he'd done. I've spent 10 years becoming everything Julian wanted to be, Min continued, his thumbs tracing small circles on my knees that made it hard to think. Richer, more powerful, more connected. And then I found out he'd gotten married. To a black woman with a degree in architecture who actually had talent he was systematically destroying. His hands slid higher, resting on my thighs now, and I hated that my body responded to the touch even as my mind recoiled from what he was confessing. I started watching you. Saw how he dismissed your ideas, how he made you shrink, how he kept you pregnant and isolated while he took credit for your design concepts. Min's eyes darkened. And I realized the perfect revenge wasn't just taking his company. It was taking his family, making his children mine, watching him raise my legacy while I waited for the exact moment to reveal the truth. "You're insane," I whispered. But I didn't move, couldn't move. "I'm thorough." He stood abruptly and pulled another tablet from the desk. "This is the custody filing we're submitting tomorrow. DNA evidence proving Julian isn't the biological father. Medical records showing he authorized a donor without your knowledge or consent. Video evidence of him drugging you. Financial records showing he emptied your personal accounts 3 months ago." He handed me the tablet, and I scrolled through page after page of documentation so comprehensive, so meticulously gathered, that it made me dizzy. "You'll get full custody," Min said. "Julian will get supervised visitation at best, criminal charges for endangerment at worst. And you'll get a $10 million settlement from his personal assets, not even touching the offshore accounts we're going to drain together. And what do you get?" My voice sounded hollow. Min's smile was slow and dangerous. "I get to watch Julian realize that the children he threw away were never his to begin with. I get to see him lose everything, his reputation, his company, his family, his freedom." He paused, leaning down until his breath ghosted across my cheek. "And I get you." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm not part of your revenge fantasy. No, you're the architect of it." His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my bottom lip. "Sign the contract, Rhonda. Become the face of Aegis Global's initiative. Help me destroy Julian completely. And when it's over, when he's in prison and his empire is ashes, you'll have everything you were always supposed to have." "Which is?" "Freedom, power, your children, a foundation that helps thousands of women escape the same trap you were in." His lips hovered so close to mine I could taste the words. "And me, if you want me." I should have said no. Should have grabbed my daughters and run as far from this beautiful, calculated monster as I could get. But Min's hand was warm against my face, and Julian's words were still echoing in my skull. "You became ugly after 2 kids." And somewhere in the wreckage of my self-worth, a darker truth was taking root. If I was going to be a weapon, I wanted to choose who I destroyed. "I want to see Julian's face when he finds out," I said quietly, and Min's smile turned absolutely feral. "Then sign." I looked at the contract. 10 years of my image belonging to Aegis Global. 10 years of being the public face of Min's empire. 10 years of being bound to this man who'd orchestrated my suffering just so he could position himself as my savior. But in exchange, custody of my daughters, financial security, revenge on the man who'd tried to erase me, and the knowledge that Julian would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd raised another man's children. I picked up the pen. Min's hand covered mine before I could sign. "Once you do this, you're mine, Rhonda. Not as property, as a partner, an equal. But you need to understand, I don't play fair, I don't forgive, and I don't let go of what belongs to me. I met his eyes, saw the cold calculation there mixed with something hotter, something that had been building since the moment he pulled up in that Maybach and offered me salvation that was really just another cage with prettier bars. Good, I said. Because I'm done being nice to men who think they own me. I signed my name in sharp, decisive strokes. Min took the contract, set it aside, and then his hands were framing my face, his forehead pressing against mine. The custody hearing is in 3 days, he murmured. Julian has no idea what's coming. His lawyers think this is a standard abandonment case. They're going to walk in confident and leave in handcuffs. And Veronica. We'll testify about the drugging she witnessed, the fabricated evidence, everything. Min's thumb traced my cheekbone. She's been documenting his crimes for 2 years. He trusted her because I made sure she was exactly his type. Young, blonde, ambitious enough to seem real. I laughed and it came out broken. You really did think of everything. Not everything. His voice dropped lower, rougher. I didn't plan for you to be this strong, this smart, this absolutely perfect. The word, perfect, hit different coming from him. Not a judgment, not a comparison. Just a statement of fact from a man who'd spent 3 years studying every detail of my existence. The girls, I said, because I needed something to anchor me before I did something stupid like close the 3 inches between his mouth and mine. Are asleep. Min's hands slid into my hair, careful of my curls, and the tenderness of it made my eyes burn. And you're safe. I promise you, Rhonda. Whatever else I am, whatever I've done, your daughters will never know a single day without you. I'll make sure of it. Why? I asked one more time because I needed to hear it. Needed to understand what this man actually wanted from me beyond revenge and business partnerships and 10-year contracts. Min pulled back just enough to look at me, and what I saw in his face stole my breath. Not love. It was too soon for that, too calculated. But possession, obsession, the kind of dark fascination that came from watching someone survive hell and choosing them specifically because of it. Because Julian threw away a diamond, he said softly, and I've been waiting my entire adult life to find something worth keeping. He kissed me then, not asking permission, not giving me time to think. Just taking what he'd apparently decided belonged to him 3 years ago when he first started watching me through security cameras and clinic records and park surveillance. I should have pushed him away. Instead, I kissed him back and let myself fall into the kind of darkness that knew exactly how to hold me without breaking. 3 days later, Julian's world would end. But that night, standing in a hotel suite overlooking the city that had tried to erase me, I became something new. Not a victim, not a prize, a queen in the making. And Min, he was the king who'd been ruthless enough to wait for his moment. Together, we were going to burn Julian's empire to the ground. Here's where I need you. Drop burn it all in the comments. If you think Rhonda made the right choice signing that contract. Drop run if you think she just traded one monster for another. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know where my ruthless romantics are hiding. And subscribe because part 2 is coming, and when you find out what happens in that courtroom, when you see Julian's face when the DNA results are read, when you discover what Min's been hiding in that nursery beyond formula and designer baby clothes, you're going to understand why this story isn't about salvation, it's about revenge. And Rhonda? She's just getting started. Part 2 drops soon. Don't miss it.